Wait a minute. What is that? That looks like a football schedule. After all the talk of NIL, the NIL Go Clearinghouse, revenue sharing, the House settlement, etc., etc., etc. Can we talk a little football today? Can we talk a little Auburn football? We're going to get into that schedule, and we're going to discuss why it is war damn time for the Auburn Tigers to finally end their long, irrational nightmare and beat either, we're not going to get greedy, we're going to suggest they could beat either Georgia or Alabama for the first time in forever. And to help me discuss that subject, someone who is quite familiar with the Iron Bowl, with the Deep South's oldest rivalry, and that's my buddy from CBS-42 in Birmingham, Scott Griffin. Scott, how you doing today, man?
How are you? I never seen anyone get so ecstatic over a schedule.
I am. I don't know about you. I'm a little, look, we have to talk about revenue sharing and NIL and all of those business aspects of college football. Those are important topics. I understand. However, the more we get away from the actual game on the field, the more we turn off the people that we're trying to appeal to, or they're trying to appeal to. That's fans. And look, at heart, you and I are journalists. We've been covering the sport for a long time. But if we weren't fans of the sport, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing, right?
That's right. It's important, those other things you were talking about, but fatiguing. Because it sounds like we're taking economics classes or something. Like, why are we taking this? We want to cover games.
Yes.
Talk about on the field. So even though it affects on the field, at least in getting the contest started, it doesn't affect during the event. So I like the during the event stuff. Yeah.
Yes. I like the idea of moving on from macroeconomics and microeconomics to actual football games. And it didn't really make much news this week as it might otherwise have, given everything else that's happening. But ESPN and the SEC did release the game times, the kickoff times, for all of the games in the SEC from week 4 through 14. We already knew the first 3 weeks schedules and the kickoff times, but now we know the entire season, and that's a reason to get excited. And it's a reason to get excited, I think, if you're an Auburn fan, because you've had a lot of reasons over the last 4 years in general, 5 years in the Iron Bowl, 8 years in the Deep South's oldest rivalry, to not be excited, to be angry, frustrated, and every other negative emotion you can think of if you're an Auburn fan when you think of those two rivalries. And let's look at the Georgia rival. As bad as the Iron Bowl has been for Auburn, they've at least had a chance. They've had very good chances the last 2 times the game was played in Jordan-Hare Stadium. But the Georgia rivalry, God, oh my goodness. Brandon, let's look at Kirby Smart's record against Auburn. Scott, Kirby 9, Auburn 1.
I see a lot of lack of scoring there, right? Just in the previous 5 years, I see a 20 spot, and then I see 4 under 13, a 14, a 10, a 7. So what you're saying, Kevin, is in the last 10 contests, they have scored over 17 points once. You're not going to beat many teams scoring over 17 once, which is a tip of the hat to Kirby Smart defensively as well. But yes, there has been a lack of drama into this game, except for a couple of falls ago when I was at Jordan-Hare that was a pretty tight game until we talked this morning. Brock Bowers took over with 4 or 5 catches there on that last drive, and he was unguardable. But that was okay. That was some drama, but the rest of them, and ironically, that was a game they scored 20. The rest of them have been not very pretty.
Yeah, and that happened under 3 different Auburn coaches. It was the end of the Gus Malzahn era, and Kirby Smart clearly had figured out Gus Malzahn's offense. He wasn't the only one, because Gus was very good out of the gate at Auburn offensively, and then people did start to figure him out, and he didn't adjust very well. He couldn't seem to decide whether he wanted to have a running quarterback, a throwing quarterback. How you go from Nick Marshall to Jeremy Johnson and Sean White, it made zero sense.
He wanted Cam Newton, but there was only one of those.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's right. He got 1 year. You got one special year with the greatest quarterback, sorry, Pat Sullivan fans, in Auburn history for 1 year.
For 1 year.
We're not talking about 4 or 5. We're talking about 1 year. And in that year, Cam had, I think, the greatest season of any college football player ever, lifting that bunch to a national championship. But Kirby clearly, as this shows, and you pointed out, look at the numbers. Auburn, other than that blowout in 2017 in the regular season, when Georgia was number 1, other than that, Auburn hasn't scored more than 20 points against Georgia.
Well, and then conversely,
flip it, and what do you see?
Well, conversely, first of all, that's 3 offensive gurus that couldn't score over 17 but one time. Conversely, defensively, as I look, it looks like only one time they've scored, 2 times out of the 10, they've scored less than 27. So let's not jump and pile on the offensive coaches. Maybe the defensive coaches of Auburn haven't been there as well. And we all know that's kind of a understood weakness for a lot of offensive coaches, to not know how to hire a defensive mind. That's a whole nother show. But yeah, at the end of the day, this is, I don't know if domination is probably a little bit too strong a word, but drama has certainly been lacking in this particular series, right?
Yeah, no, domination is not too strong a word. It may not be strong enough. And you know what? And this is, and look, Auburn fans are well aware of this, especially older Auburn fans. Let me ask you, I don't have a graphic for this, but let me ask you a trivia question. Name me the last Auburn football coach to have a winning record against Georgia.
I would say Pat Dye, but that may not be correct.
You're close, but you're not quite right.
Steve Jordan?
No. Pat Dye did have a winning record against Georgia.
Tubbs?
No. Tuberville was 5-5. He won his first couple, lost his last 3, ended up 5-5 against Georgia. Gene Chizik 1-3. Gus Malzahn 2-7. Brian Harsin 0-2. Hugh Freeze 0-2. Dye was 7-5 against his alma mater. Of course, veteran college football fans know that Pat Dye played at Georgia, was an All-American there before he became the most important coach in Auburn history. No, our buddy Terry Bowden.
Wow.
Was actually, and I'm not going to give him grace. He gets the L in his 1998, even though he'd already left the premises by then. We're hanging the L on him, but he was 3-2-1 against Georgia he was there 5.5 years.
Let's be honest, that with the Dye 7-5, that's all you can ask for in this. We're not asking you to be 7-3. We're asking you to be close to 500, but it hadn't happened in the last 11 years. Yeah.
And that is just astounding that Georgia's won 8 straight, 11 of 12, 17 of 20. That should not happen. That's an embarrassment to the legacy of Pat Dye, that Georgia has dominated this series the way that it has. But hold on, there's hope. And on that schedule, Brendan, if we can look at that schedule again, for Auburn in 2025. When they announced the game times, and this is a cute gimmick, if you will, that ESPN uses, but I will say actually a smart approach. They don't lock in every game time for the rest of the season. They do allow some flexibility. hence the word flex, afternoon, night. And we're going to get to that word night in a minute because I think that's really important. But if you look at that, the afternoon games will kick off between 2:30 and 3:30 Central Time. We're going to stay in Central Time since we're in Birmingham. Night games kick off between 5 and 7 p.m. Early games between 11 and noon. So, and flex games can either be an afternoon game or a night game.
Right? Yeah.
And they make that determination no later than 6 days before kickoff. Obviously, you want to give fans who are traveling to the games an opportunity to plan a little more in detail as they get ready to head to the campus. But there's only one game on there in which you see the word night, and that's the Georgia game on October 11th. And why is that important? Even, Scott, here's another, I'll give you some more fun numbers. Even over the last 4 years, 4 straight losing seasons at Auburn, right? Auburn is 9-2 in true night games. Now, I'm not talking about games that kick off at 2:30 and then it gets dark and the game ends under the lights.
Night, right?
Beginning at night. Again, after 5 o'clock Central Time, 6 o'clock Eastern.
Yes.
There may be some fading daylight as at kickoff, but it is essentially a true night game.
Right.
What is it the announcer says at Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge? As the sun finds its home in the western sky. That gives me chills every time I go to a game at LSU. And that's what we're talking about. True night games. There is obviously the Ball State game is a night game. That's a gimme early in the year. But that Georgia game is going to kick off between 5 and 7 p.m. Auburn has been, even in these last 4 years, 4 straight losing seasons, 9-2 in true night games at home. 3-2 in true night games against SEC opponents. Remember, were you at the game? Were you at the Texas A&M game after they had fired Brian Harsin and Cadillac Williams was the interim head coach? And remember the emotional outpouring in that stadium? It was something special. And A&M, the last 2 times they've gone in there at night, they've gotten beat, including last year in 4 overtimes.
And that was a pretty good team, Texas A&M team.
Yes, last year it was better than the 1-2 years previous. That was Jimbo's last team. That was not a very good team.
No.
But last year they were pretty good, and Auburn beat them in 4 overtimes. Mm-hmm. And that was and again another Auburn team with a losing record. What is it? I'm going to ask you your thoughts, Scott, because you've been to a lot of games in Jordan-Hare Stadium at all times of day. What is it about Jordan-Hare After Dark?
I don't know, because it's not as easy an answer as talking about LSU, right, after dark, because it's enhancements that take place. Not that that's not going on at Auburn. I don't know. It's just something about it. Maybe these days with the media and different things, guys get more hyped because they know it's kind of prime time, for lack of a better word, for football at night. You're at home anyway, so you get that energy. I think that's the main thing. But then that nighttime, that build up all day to finally have your team, and you and I are going in the stadium and whatever, there's just that natural build up. I think it's probably enhanced for any home team. But, Auburn does have a special atmosphere at Jordan-Hare Stadium. To your point, though, 3-2 SEC, but a lot of those games, as you know, are early on cupcake games that they always play at night early in the year to stay away from the heat, right? When they want to get games. So
like Ball State this year.
Exactly.
It's a 6:30 kickoff.
So there's a little bit of that, but they are 3-2 to your point, and it is different at Jordan-Hare at night. Not to the LSU level, but I don't know. I don't know if there's one easy answer for that.
And that, and I took some liberties here. Each of these games in which these all-time great plays happened, the prayer in Jordan-Hare, the kick six, both in 2013 against Georgia, Ricardo Lewis catching that tip ball on the left, and then Chris Davis taking back the missed field goal, 109 yards in the center. And then it happened in reverse 2 years ago when Alabama went in there. Auburn had that game won, never should have lost that game. Gave that game away. Rush 2. You rush 2. It's 4th and 31 in the last minute. You rush 2. You give Jalen Milroe time to throw a dart to Isaiah Bond, and that was Gravedigger, of course. But crazy things happen in Jordan-Hare Stadium. They happen against Georgia. They happen against Alabama. They happen against Alabama a little more frequently than they have against Georgia. Brendan, pop up there. After the 2019 game, Scott, were you in Jordan-Hare Stadium?
Remember Georgia in the kick 6 year? They had the crazy play that was miraculous.
That's the prayer. That's the prayer in Jordan-Hare. Yeah,
so
yeah.
It does happen occasionally, right?
Yes, yeah. After the 2019 Iron Bowl, Brendan, pop up the graphic. Ain't nothing like it nowhere. I stole Dreamland's advertising slogan, talking about the Iron Bowl, but not the Iron Bowl anywhere, but the Iron Bowl in Auburn. There's something different about that game in that stadium. And then think about the last two, Scott. Auburn should have won the last 3 Iron Bowls. No, the last 4. They won in 2017. They won in 2019. That was the 48-45 game.
Yeah.
In which Gus Malzahn outsmarted Nick Saban at the end, got Alabama to rush guys on and off the field. They had too many men on the field. Alabama they didn't have to punt to who's a great punt returner? He's now with the Dolphins. Jalen Waddle.
Jalen Waddle, yes.
They were going to have to punt to Jalen Waddle, which was a dangerous thing. And Gus bamboozled Nick by his substitution pattern, and they forced Alabama to have 12 men on the field. But they should have won in 21, 4 overtimes. Yeah. They had to lead the whole game. It was Bryce Young had to do Bryce Young things to get it to overtime. And then Gravedigger in 2023. So that is why, one of the reasons why I say it's war damn time that Auburn beat one of those 2 teams, because first and foremost, they're both going to Auburn this year. Do you like the fact that those games are separated now? They've been separated by a non-conference dog, if you will.
Right.
In many years.
They are separated.
But now they're in October. One's in October, one's in at the end of November. Do you like that?
I think I think so. It's going to be hard to do that with the ever-changing landscape of each team. But if you for sure put that kind of game in there, like they separated LSU, Alabama, and Alabama, Auburn. So I think it's fair, because normally in a normal season, those are such tremendously big games. Now, if the SEC ever goes to 9 games, that might change, right? And they go back to that, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I think that's fair to do that for any team, not just Alabama and Auburn, to separate major rivals late in the year that could be compelling matchups for sure. Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't predict it, because that would be foolish, especially in June, especially on Friday the 13th in June, to make that kind.
Yeah.
That would be spooky in a different kind of way, to predict that Auburn would beat Georgia or would beat Alabama. But my thought is, if not now, when? Because Georgia has more questions than they've had in some time. They don't have a proven quarterback. Alabama does not have a proven quarterback. Alabama's coming off its worst season since Nick Saban's first season.
Long time, yeah.
With three regular season losses. And 2 of them, look, Vanderbilt was improved, but that's a 6-6 football team. You should not give up 40 points to that Vanderbilt team. I don't care how much magic Diego Pavia weaves throughout the course of the game. You shouldn't give up 40 as Alabama did. And then you should be able to score more than 3. I don't care how good the head coach, Brent Venables at Oklahoma, is as a defensive mind. You should score more than 3 when you play the Sooners, as they did last year, but they lost that one 24-3. So Alabama, to me, is vulnerable, relatively speaking. It's not Ball State, but it's vulnerable by Alabama standards. Georgia, same deal. Vulnerable by Georgia standards. That's why I say, if Auburn doesn't beat one of them this year, when does it happen?
Well, to your point, and I think we're focusing on the quarterback position, because Jackson Arnold comes in, although he only threw for 1,400 yards and 12 touchdowns last year. He comes in as a high-profile former 5-star guy that at least played an entire year in the SEC, right? So he's coming to a Hugh Freeze system. He's got those 4 freshman wide receiver, although only one, Cam Coleman, really stood out. But the other 3 are still there. They've got another transfer in from Georgia Tech. So they've got a great wide receiver room. So the offense should be, I'm going to use the word has to be better. To your point, Gunnar Stockton is a 4-star guy that hasn't played a lot of college football. Ty Simpson, as you know, former 5-star guy, got a handful of starts under his belt, but hasn't played a lot of college football. Now, they may end up being better than Jackson Arnold. But to your point today, June 13th, you would think you could argue that the quarterback room at Auburn, at least the starter, might be a little better or ahead because we have a resume to look at with him. And even though it wasn't great, there's that capability. So while Georgia and Alabama have the history of what we're talking about, having beaten these guys, Auburn may have the advantage there. And again, it's kind of weird that they have them both at home. I can't overstate that they need to split those. I would not want, it's great the year you have them both at home, obviously. It's really bad next year when, if they both play at the same time. I know the SEC schedules, it's not the way it used to be. But if you had to play them again on the road, like you did last year, that's a problem. So I guess your feeling is from the quarterback room standpoint mainly, or?
Well, it's a combination of factors. Again, like I said, I think Alabama and Georgia are more vulnerable. I think overall, they're more gettable than they've been in some time. I think
they don't seem as elevated, maybe.
Exactly. I think the gap, I think it's fair to say that the talent gap between Auburn and Georgia and Auburn and Alabama has narrowed. It was very wide. I'm not saying they've caught up by any stretch.
But they do have 2 top 10 recruiting classes. So it should be, even if Alabama and Georgia stayed where they were, and they did, Auburn getting better narrows the gap naturally, right?
Yes. So and even when you look at it from that perspective, even with what Hugh Freeze inherited from Brian Harsin 2 years ago, both Georgia, and you were talking about the game, you were there, Brock Bowers had to go and do all-American things on a last drive. It was 20-20 with 6 or so minutes left in the fourth quarter, and Georgia drove down the field, and Brock Bowers had to be great, and he was on that drive, and Georgia ended up winning 27-20. That's been the closest game in the rivalry since Auburn won in 2017.
Yeah.
And then Alabama goes in there, and that's an Alabama team that's headed to the playoffs. And Auburn had the lead in the last minute. And again, Jalen Milroe had to throw a dart, 4th and 31. I know he had all the time in the world to throw it.
It's still a miracle play.
It's still a miracle play. Yeah, and Isaiah Bond got open, and did he push off? Who cares? He made a play.
Miracle play, yes.
Yeah, he made a play. Jalen Milroe made a play. But it took a miracle play, maybe the converse of the kick 6 in some ways, for Alabama to win that game. So even the vast talent disparity that existed 2 years ago, when they went to Auburn, Georgia struggled to win.
They were in doubt games. Yeah.
Alabama needed a miracle to win.
Yeah.
So 2 years later, given the influx of talent that Hugh Freeze and his staff have brought in there, why shouldn't Auburn beat at least one of its 2 chief rivals this year? That's my question. Not can they. Why shouldn't they?
Well, why shouldn't they? That offensive gap is where it was more evident to me. That's definitely narrow, because I would think Alabama or Georgia wide receiver rooms, just focusing on that position, aren't much better than what Auburn can offer up right now. The quarterback room we just talked about is probably equal as far as right now, June 13th. Auburn has had some offensive line problems, especially run blocking. That's supposedly better. They were gotten some young talent in there. It's got to develop. Defensive line talent is better. And obviously, as coaches say, offensive, defensive lines is where you win football games in the SEC. So if those are better, they should be more competitive, right? So,
yes.
I agree. Overall, all that being said, they should at least be competitive, especially being at home. To your point, you better do that if you don't pull an upset. At least be competitive and have it be like a couple of years ago where it was in doubt with a few minutes to go in the game.
Yeah, there is something, again, there's just something special. You've seen it many, many times. I've seen it many, many times. When they play the Iron Bowl in Auburn, let's look back at that graphic, Brendan. More so than the Georgia game, there's nothing like it nowhere. And again, apologies to Dreamland or hat tip to Dreamland for their advertising slogan. This is what I wrote in 2019 after Auburn won 48-45. Remember in that game, Scott, Mac Jones threw 6 touchdown passes.
Yes.
2 of them to Auburn, 4 to Alabama. And we all remember the pick 6 in that game in the goal. First of all, why Steve Sarkisian wasn't running the ball with Najee Harris at the goal line. Why he had Mac Jones throw a pass that hit the receiver, I think in the lower back, in the spine, bounced off, and Auburn's linebacker intercepted it, took it the distance. And that inspired me to write this. The Iron Bowl in Auburn is the Mount Olympus of heroes and goats, the Dante's Inferno of decisive and derisive moments, the magic kingdom of beautiful madness, the bipolar opposite of joyless murder ball. More often than not, the end game of this game to end all games is Alabama's ass on Auburn's grass, and they're not going to keep him off the field tonight. That tip to Rod Bramlett, the late Rod Bramlett, for that incredible call from the kick 6 game. You can't. I tried to explain it. I tried to put it into words, but you have to feel it. You have to experience it. You have to know that when we get to November 29th, and that's a flex game, so it'll either kick off at 2:30 or be a night game. And I didn't even look this up. I can't remember the last time the Iron Bowl wasn't a 2:30 kickoff,
right,
in that what used to be the CBS window. So, but it's going to end after dark. It will get dark.
Yeah, and most of the big plays have come at dark.
Yes.
We talked about the prayer, the kick 6, that's come in the nighttime.
So every one of those has come
the
under.
Has gotten ramped up from a competitive game.
And it's come under the lights, yes.
Right.
And whatever has happened to that point in the season, and usually Alabama's been up, Auburn's been down, Auburn raises its level.
Yeah.
Alabama comes to town. And that's what they're going to have to do again this year. So, Brendan, if you will, let's look at the
but what you're saying at the end of the day, they need a win, is what I'm hearing from you.
Yes.
Not competitiveness.
No, I'm beyond. No.
Standpoint.
I'm beyond that.
You got to put one up in the win column.
If you're asking me about expectations, and obviously the first expectation is you got to have a winning season.
Yeah.
You can't have another losing season. If you have another losing season, then I don't see what reason you would have to continue with the current coaching staff. Let's just be honest. If you can't have a winning record against this schedule this year, in your 3rd year on that campus, when every Auburn coach going back, starting with Pat Dye in 1981, did something special in year 1 or year 2. If you can't make something special happen by year 3, time to stop blaming Brian Harsin. Time to stop blaming Alan Green.
Point. Yeah.
This is your team. It's your staff. It's your roster. It's your time, Hugh Freeze, to prove that you are the guy that can take Auburn back to what Auburn is used to being, what it expects to be, and what it should be.
Yeah. It to me, just like last year, they had the odd 5 games at home to start the year. They could have really set the table and gotten confidence. And let's not underestimate how you feel about your football team and how the players feel about themselves, right? And they didn't. They didn't pull that off. They were 2-3. So they were toast really as the year went on there. This year, I would argue the same thing, Kevin. When you look at that schedule again, you've only got 2 at home in the first 5 winnable games, and you will win those. But what about Baylor on a Friday night, an odd time against a competent, possibly good team? But then you've got Oklahoma and Texas A&M, who should be better on the road. So I think to have that shot against Georgia, they don't need to be 2-3 again, or they're not going to feel good about themselves, because Georgia's likely going to be undefeated or close there. I don't have their schedule in front of me, but and then you got Missouri after that. So yes, even though the games are more competitive with Georgia, Missouri, Arkansas, Kentucky, I think it's those first 5 with those two, even those 2 wins at home. What happens on the road in those first 3 is going to tell us maybe what happens on October 11th. And that's going to tell us maybe what happens on November 29th.
That's a great
At least
point.
from the Auburn side of things, obviously.
Yeah, how they feel about themselves when they get to October 11th, when Georgia rolls into Jordan-Hare.
Is Arnold the answer? We're going to know after 5 games, right?
It will be determined.
Is he who we thought he was, right?
It'll be determined by that opening stretch.
Yeah.
As you said, much more difficult than last year when they had 5 straight home games, and they did not take advantage of it. They lose to Cal. They lose to Oklahoma. They lose to Arkansas. Every one of them a winnable game.
But they didn't win them.
They let them get away.
That's right.
So now you better be sharp sooner this year, starting with that opener, because Dave Aranda, look, Baylor's not going to have a talent advantage on Auburn.
No.
I refuse to believe that. But Dave Aranda knows how to coach up a defense. He knows how to break down an offense. And he's had all offseason, and we'll have the rest of the offseason and fall camp to prepare for that Auburn offense in Jackson Arnold and what it's going to look like under Hugh Freeze. So that's not a must-win game. You're not going to write the season off after 1 week. But that game is critical. And really, I look at it as you do, as more of a package, the first 5. Where are you after that? And you're coming off back-to-back road games. The good thing from an Auburn perspective is you get A&M in the afternoon in College Station. You don't have to play them at night. And as we've talked about throughout this show, every place is crazier at night and more difficult to win as a visitor. So that's a little edge for Auburn there, that they get that as an afternoon game. Oklahoma could be an afternoon game. You see flex by that on that schedule. That'll either be an afternoon or a night game. Obviously, 2 gimmies, what should be gimmies against Ball State and South Alabama.
Okay.
So if you're 3-2, even 3-2 going in there against Georgia, I think you're still okay. If you're 2-3 again after 5, then you're looking at disaster.
So 3-2 for you, though, assuming Ball State, South Alabama, like I think you are, you're really only 1-2 on the road, but still that would be okay.
I'm saying minimum requirement. You would like to be at least 4-1. Right. And of course, you'd love to be 5-0.
Minimum 3-2.
Minimum 3-2 to really feel good about yourself, as you said, because you get a week off before Georgia comes in there. Georgia actually plays on the 4th. I don't have their schedule in front of me. I forget who they play, but so you've got a little extra time to heal up, prepare, scheme, game plan for the Bulldogs. So and then you get at the end of the schedule, and who knows how Auburn is feeling about itself. The good thing, again, when they go to Vanderbilt, it's an afternoon game. When they go to Arkansas, it's an early game, either 11 a.m. or noon kickoff. You love to play those as a visiting team. The home team the home fans don't have a chance to get ramped up and juiced up. And so that's usually an easier environment to play early on the road. So again, there's a lot to like about this schedule, the way it shakes out for Auburn.
Yeah. And I was going to say they played Alabama and then Kentucky before that. But back to Auburn, I think I hear you saying, without saying it, you would like at least one of those wins not to be Baylor, because I think Baylor's key. But if you lose it, I don't think all is lost in the season. You'd like for one of them at least to be Oklahoma, Texas A&M, to feel okay mentally and be confident with Georgia coming in, and in the preparation for that off week with Georgia coming in.
And look, so how much is going to be swirling around the Oklahoma game for Jackson Arnold?
Yeah.
They kicked him to the curb. They said, thanks for your service. Good luck in your future endeavors. Let him walk out the door. He's going to, how's he going to handle the emotions of that weekend? There's so much to look forward to. And I'm glad, for one, Scott Griffin, that we are talking about actual football on the field for a change. We're only a couple of months away from the start of the season, but I'm glad we're talking about the sport itself and not all the ancillary business aspects of the sport.
Conversely, let's say they go 4-1. Then, as you look at the last part, we're focusing on the first 5, but only 2 on the road, and it's only Arkansas and Vandy, winnable games. And at home, you got some toss-ups with Georgia, Missouri, Alabama, but if you get 1 or 2 of those and you're 4-1, that's 6. Now you're in that 8-9 win area, right? To show improvement from the last couple of years.
And that's really where you should be in year 3.
Year 3, to your point, yes. You've narrowed the gap, 2 top 10 recruiting classes, all those things. Bad year last year, Jackson Arnold in, 3rd year for an offensive coach, all the things we've talked about. They should be 8 or 9. In fact, 8 might be even a little bit of a disappointment. A 9-3, I would give them a B+. Nice job. Let's see what you build for next year.
All right. So as we wrap up here, I know you and I both are of like minds about this. We're not crazy about making predictions, but do you have a lean or do you want to go out on a limb and say Auburn will beat Georgia or Alabama?
That's hard to say. I would think just as of today, they would have more chance to beat Alabama if the year goes like they think. And to your point, not that you toss out the record books, but you come close to it when it's at Auburn between those two, regardless of what both bring in, baggage or celebration. Mm-hmm. So I would say the best chance with that answer would be Alabama, not knowing anything about the Georgia situation and such yet. What are your thoughts on that? Would you agree? Or
I'm going to go
drama with Alabama.
I'm going to go a little farther out on the limb. I'm going to suggest. I'm not going to predict. I'm going to suggest. That's my new thing. I make suggestions, not predictions.
It's the same thing, by the way. But go ahead.
It's the same thing. I'm just using a different label. Okay.
That's right. It's a cute try.
If Auburn doesn't beat Georgia or Alabama, Auburn will be looking for a new coach for the 2026 season.
Or
not both.
You're beyond competitive.
It does nothing for the Auburn program to play a close game against Georgia. They did it 2 years ago. It does nothing for the Auburn program to play a close game against Alabama. They did it in 2023. They did it in 2021. So
we've seen that, right?
We've seen that movie. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
This is not travel ball. This is not T-ball. You're not getting a juice box and a pat on the head because you played hard. You gave it your best. You came up just short. No. No, you're Auburn football. It's time to start acting like it, and it is war damn time for you to beat at least one of your traditional rivals.
If both, we're maybe talking
playoff.
10 wins, maybe.
Playoff.
Yeah. I mean,
you beat both, you're talking playoff. Unless the season goes completely haywire, which would be so Auburn to beat Georgia and Alabama and lose to Vanderbilt and lose to Oklahoma or lose to Texas A&M. That would be Auburn being Auburn in the traditional derisive sense of the phrase.
Yeah. So you're saying only 2, but I agree with you. The importance has ramped up for just those 2, besides the first 5 we talked about that are very important. But for those 2, the rest of the year, and I agree, you got to win one of them. Just it's like sales, right? Well, show me where you've improved. If you lose, it's not where you got close to your budget. I want you to go over budget, right? So, they probably need to win at least one.
It's time.
Yeah.
War damn time, Scott Griffin.
That's the 3rd time you've said that.
I love that phrase. All right. Well, we got to get out of here. I'm just excited that we're talking football. Scott Griffin from CBS-42 in Birmingham. Thank you for joining us today. Brendan Martin, best producer in the business. Thank you for putting this all together. I'm Kevin Scarbinsky. This is Scarbo Knows. Check out all the great shows on the SEC Sideline Sports Network. All right, everyone, have a great day. See ya.